Welcome to Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong, a podcast where two exes have a frank and open discussion about their friendship after being together for 20 years. In this episode, Josh and Sean talk about toxic masculinity in Mexico and Australia. They discuss how our heroes can often disappoint us. They also look back at some childhood traumas, and of course, how could they not mention the French athlete whose Olympic medal hopes were dashed by his own genitalia. Enjoy the show.
Hello, welcome to another episode of Tell Me Where I'm Going Wrong. And you can tell me where I'm going wrong with this, but is this episode 4 or 5, Josh?
This is episode 4. Hi everyone, welcome back. We're on episode 4 already.
Episode 4. Okay, so my name's Sean. We might get to a point where we stop introducing ourselves, but what's your name?
My name's Josh, and I think we should always introduce ourselves. You know, you don't know when someone's going to jump into the podcast.
I don't know, sometimes, I don't know if this is the episode where we're going to do it, but talking about our favorite podcasts that we listen to. But, there's like really different ways of talking or, some podcasts you wouldn't even know it, they just start talking. It's almost like you've dropped in middle of a thought. And they don't really
most of the podcasts I listen to, the hosts are either introduced by, a third party, or they introduce themselves. So
I suppose we have our bit at the beginning where we do the intro with your music.
Yeah.
So that's like the official sort of intro, or I don't know what you call that. It's not like a theme song.
I love how we're workshopping this on the podcast.
But I think this is organic. I think this is organic. This is what I would listen to. That's, I suppose, why I feel comfortable being this chaotic.
Yeah, I don't mind it. It amuses me. That's all. It's funny that we're just like, we're just wondering out loud, thinking out loud.
Well, I hate in a podcast where people act slick and they're not. I would rather people be goofy and like, hey, we're just working this out. Than rather than them try and act like they've got it all smooth.
So it's just like, tits to the wind, and you see every side of us, the good and the bad and the ugly.
Talking about tits to the wind, I just got back from swimming. So I go swimming, as you know, in the pool on my estate. I don't know if I've mentioned that before.
I don't think so.
But the pool today, normally it's quite warm. Not warm, but it's a temperature where you don't have to think about it. You just get in. But today it felt a little cool. And I was just like right up to my breast. Then I was like, I don't know. And then I just was like, But then once I was in, it was fine. But do you know when you used to go swimming when you were a kid at, I don't know, where did you used to go to the...
At school, we used to go like on a swimming once a week. I don't know how often it was. At primary school, we'd get on a bus and they'd drive us to Brentford swimming pool, which is no longer there. It's, I think, being turned into apartments now. But
Brentford Leisure Centre?
No. Long before that, it's like an old council-run pool. I don't know how to describe it, but yeah, just off Brentford High Street, and. But then I used to go to the Brentford Leisure Centre just by Chiswick Roundabout.
Was that heated? Or what was it like getting in the water there?
Have you never been there?
No, I've never been inside. Okay. I've been past it a million times.
Okay. Well, there are two. Well, there are definitely two pools, maybe three. I think just two. One is just like a traditional, pool where you can do laps in lanes. And then the other one is a big sort of family geared affair where it has a wave machine. So like, I think once an hour or something, there were waves like streaming across the pool and kids are screaming. There's a water slide. I mean, I don't know. I haven't been there in years, but this is what I remember.
Probably refurbed it, right? Since you've been there.
Well, I'd hope so. Yeah.
Maybe this is where we could talk about one of your greatest childhood traumas.
We can do, because I was when you said Brentford Fountain Leisure Centre, I was like, oh, okay, we're gonna go there. But
I
I
mean,
feel
I
that's
do
going to
want to get
bring.
back to I do want to get back to swimming, but if we
Well,
could
because
have a little segue.
you did say talking of tits to the wind, and you never really sort of finished the thought
Well, it was
process.
about my chest being exposed for everyone to look at.
Oh, I
I was
see. I see.
trying to
Okay.
decide whether to get under the cold water, and then I just went for it. But
Okay.
yeah, what happened at the Brentford Leisure Centre? Set the
This is
scene for us.
we're going to take a bit of a somber turn, I think. But when I was about 11 years old, I went swimming with my friend from across the road, and maybe we were 12, 11 or 12, and we went to the Brentford Fountain Leisure Centre, and we went swimming, and we played in the waves. And then afterwards, my friend Lindsay went into the women's changing room, and I went into the men's. I got changed, and I got changed first, and I went and stood out in the lobby waiting for Lindsay to come out of the women's changing room. And I was looking at a vending machine, and suddenly someone put their arm around my neck and dragged me out of the swimming baths, out of the leisure centre, and down the steps and along the street. And I froze, and I had that real sort of flight or freeze thing. I just froze, and fortunately, a couple who were on the street sort of intervened. They could see that I was terrified, and they intervened. And long story short, it was a man who lived underneath the motorway around the corner, and he he mistook me for another kid who had been shouting abuse at him earlier that day, because I went home. I had to go to the police station and do a statement. The police, took him in, whatever they did. I didn't press charges or anything, but it was a very traumatic experience, and I'm doing a very classic thing of like using humor to cover up trauma. But yeah, it was a very horrible thing that happened to me.
But what did your parents say? Like, what happened? Did the police bring you home, or like
Well,
how did
no,
it?
I went. My friend Lindsay and I just got the bus home after that, and it's funny. I mean, this would have been 1988, maybe. It's funny that something like that would happen, and no, no adult sort of stopped to think, oh, maybe we should call the children's parents. That the leisure centre didn't have a process whereby they had to, you know, file a report or anything like that. So Lindsay and I, just got the bus home, and then when I got home, I told my parents, and then they took me to the police station.
And how were your parents about it? Like, how did they support you? Were they supportive, or
I, to be honest, I don't remember. I mean, yeah, they were supportive. I mean, what, what other response would they have done? Could
I
they
don't
have
know?
given
Like
like
people,
indifference or
yeah. Well,
minimizing?
people are weird,
Yeah,
mate. Like people are weird, especially
true,
a
true.
generation ago.
Hmm.
People feel like you should be able to just shrug off a traumatic experience. Like, a
Yeah,
lot of people treated children like, oh yeah, well, whatever, get over it. And that's how a
yeah.
lot of people um, excuse not wanting to have to deal with something difficult as well.
Mm,
So if like there's child abuse in your family or something, people just think, well, in the olden days, we just dealt with it.
yeah, that's true. No,
And
they were,
your
they were.
parents are of that generation, aren't they? Where it was like that stiff upper lip kind of mentality.
Yeah, they are. They are. But no, they were, supportive. I don't really remember the sort of the intricate details of it. I just remember being upset and going to the police, and yeah, and then I don't remember how, whether it was later that day or that next day or later that week. The police got in touch and explained what had happened, that he'd mistaken me for someone else, and you know,
Am I completely misremembering this? That he was friends with Chicken George?
yeah, yeah, exactly.
Okay, so who was Chicken George?
Chicken George was a homeless man who lived in Chiswick when I was at school, when I was growing up here and at primary school. And I mean, I don't know much about him. I think he's dead now. I do remember looking, I think I read something online many years ago that he died. But he was just a homeless man, a local homeless man who sometimes lived in the car park adjacent to the primary school that we lived in. Primary school that we went to.
Yeah.
And that's all I really know about him. I don't know much else.
And so
But
this
yeah,
friend of Chicken George, was he on some sort of retribution? Like, did it have something to do with Chicken George that he was thinking? I thought you and Anna
oh
told me once that he was trying to get revenge because people had been making fun of Chicken George.
no, I think he's. I mean, it's so long ago. I mean, what's that? 36 years ago.
Yeah.
I think he said maybe he and Chicken George, and I wish I could tell our listeners where the name Chicken George came from. I have no idea why he was called Chicken George. Maybe someone can answer that. I don't know if there are any listeners who grew up in Chiswick in the 80s. Anyway,
Did he look like a chicken?
not that I recall. I don't
Was
really
he
remember what he looked like.
was he beak-like in appearance?
Not that I remember.
Okay.
Um, but yeah, I think he said that him and Chicken George had been together earlier that day, and kids had been shouting at them and calling them names or something. I mean,
Okay.
I think this man probably had some sort of either mental health or addiction issue, or both. And his behavior wasn't necessarily rational. And yeah, it was just an unfortunate incident. And
And did you
one
ever go back to the leisure centre after that?
I did. I think about, I don't know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I did go for a few swims there, but I don't know. It doesn't really bother me anymore. And, at some point in this podcast, we can talk about, maybe not this episode, but we can talk about EMDR therapy, which I did a few years ago, which has really helped with that and some other childhood traumas. But
But you didn't.
yeah,
So you didn't go back when you were a kid, though. Like you didn't sort of go, "Oh, well, I'm going back there again." Did you
no,
stop going?
no, I think that was the last time I went as a
And did
child.
it did it have any connection for you with put you off swimming in general, or
Um, I don't know. Actually, it's funny. I don't think I've ever really thought about that myself, but I do feel a sense of unease whenever I go to a public swimming pool. But that could just be because, you have to get changed in front and I've got more childhood traumas from the changing rooms at school, which we can go into in another episode maybe. But
do you, as
um,
an adult now, do you feel comfortable getting changed communally in front of other people?
um, sometimes yes, sometimes not. It depends really. It depends on the environment. I don't know. What about you?
I don't care. Like,
Do you get changed when you go swimming? Do you get changed there, or do you just get changed at
yeah, I get
home?
changed down there because I have a shower down there.
Hmm.
Part of that is I want to have a shower down there after I get out of the pool. It feels really nice.
Mm.
Another part of me is I'm so poor that I think every hot shower I can have outside my house might save a little bit of money with
Yeah,
hot water bills
I
over the
mean,
year.
if you're paying for the membership, you might as well get
Yeah,
a hot shower included.
but I honestly find it weirdly liberating, not in like a naturist, exhibitionist kind of way, but
Mm.
because I've had such, I suppose, issues around my body for so long
Mm.
about being, fat or obese or not being an ideal beauty standard or anything like that, it is kind of liberating to just, as we said, throw my tits to the wind and
Yeah.
just be like, do you know what? I don't care, and I'm just comfortable. I'm having a hot shower, had a nice swim, so I go in the communal shower bit where it's like four showers in one thing,
Mm.
and um, and then I just get changed in front of people. I don't care. It
Mm.
doesn't bother me. But today there was a weird incident where I don't know. There was this young guy in who'd been swimming in the pool, and he was in the change room, and I don't know how old he was, but he could have been anything from 14 to 23. He was
Mm.
very nondescript. But he came and he sat down in the change room. He was still in all his swimming gear, and he got his phone out and he started like
Mm.
looking on his phone.
Yeah,
And I
that's
said
not
to him,
cool.
"Oh, hey mate, you're not meant to have your phone out in the change rooms. You
Hmm.
should put it away." and he didn't answer me. And he just kept looking at his phone. And this
Oh,
other guy who was in the change room just looked at me and shrugged, like, I don't know.
yeah.
And so I just sort of ignored it. But if anyone sees any photos of me naked online, let me know. It might be my forced my hand into
Into
the OnlyFans
OnlyFans.
arena or something.
Yeah, exactly.
But I was almost snatched as a child as well. Probably more than once in Australia. There's a real like spate of child snatching in Australia. Do you know, like all around like Brisbane and northern New South Wales? We talked about this when Kale was visiting, but
Yeah, we
there
talked
seems to
about the
be a
Daniel
disproportionate,
Morecambe
yeah,
disappearance,
Daniel
didn't we?
Morecambe case, but there's a real disproportionate number, or it seems at least, of children being snatched. Now, I'm sure that's a very Australian centric idea that, if you went to Mexico or like, I don't know, some other countries where like children are taken into slavery and, like
Mm,
I'm sure many more children are snatched around the world than in Australia. But it
mm,
just seems growing up there, it was always on the news that a child was being taken and disappeared and killed. And when I was very young, and I can't remember how old I was at a caravan park with my mother and my sisters, and it was called Dickies Beach Caravan Park
mm,
on the Sunshine Coast north of Brisbane in Queensland. And these two men who, my memory now makes me think they were maybe in their 20s. These two
mm,
men came up and said, "Hey, we're going for a walk at the beach. Would you like to come? We want to show you something really fun."
mm.
And I think I did a similar thing where I sort of froze for a second, and they were there and they were about to sort of put their hands on me and not grab me, but lead me the way they wanted me to go. And
How old were you? Sorry,
I can't remember. I must have been very young, like
like 7.
7 or 6 maybe, and 5 maybe even. And my sister came around the corner and I yelled out to her, "Help me." And these two guys ran away.
Oh, really? Okay.
And it was really scary, but it's weird, isn't it? Like hearing about your experience and then talking of that experience, it's really
Mm,
hard to know how much of that stays with you.
yeah.
Like I don't
And it's
know.
so interesting how people respond differently. Like I couldn't yell "help me." I I still remember the that feeling of my throat. I mean, he had his arm around my throat and was dragging me along, but it wasn't so much that it was just the fear that sort of stopped me from being able to shout "help me." So it's so interesting how, and that's and it's interesting, and that's the thing about trauma as well, isn't it? That it's not so much the actual event that happens. It's what how you respond both in the moment and then in the years that follow, and it's all the sort of the additional layers of memory that build up around the incident, and that's the trauma. But yeah, it's so interesting how you said you were able to yell to your sister.
Yeah, and I mean that's also my memory of it. Like who knows what really happened? I mean, I was so young, and so by the time I even got to that age, I
mm,
might not have even been 6. Do you know, this is another thing, like what you were saying, how the leisure centre didn't even call your parents.
mm.
I don't know many children these days that could go to the pool on their own.
Well, that's
Without
yeah. That I think about that incident now, and I think, gosh, if we were like 11 or 12, like I don't know, would like and it was a bus ride away, so it was me and my friend from across the road, and we just would get the bus there. But that's what we did in those days. Like but yeah, I know what you mean. Like if I was responsible for an 11 or 12-year-old today, I would be. I mean, you wouldn't want to sort of mollycoddle children, but I'd also think I don't really want them getting public transport to a public pool by themselves at that age. But it was a different time.
that's a weird word, isn't it? Mollycoddle.
Mollycoddle, yeah.
What do you know what the etymology of that is?
No idea.
We need to
No
look it
idea.
up for next
We
time.
should have a gloss. We'll do as a footnote to the episode. We can do a glossary and an etymology.
It's so weird. It's one word, isn't it? Mollycoddle.
Mollycoddle. Yeah.
Like double
Yeah.
DLE.
Yeah. I think so. Double L, double D.
But I,
Any other traumatic childhood memories we want to bring up?
oh God, this podcast isn't long enough.
But
But
it's funny you were saying about that incident in the caravan park, because it reminded me of another time I was also with my friend Lindsay from across the road. Obviously, we were we were a very sought after young couple in back in the day, but we were in Ravenscourt Park. It would have been a year or two either side of that event, probably, I don't know, a year earlier or something. And I remember we were in Ravenscourt Park for maybe a fun fair or something. Do people know what a fun fair is outside the UK? What do you call them in Australia? Fun fair?
I don't know. In the US, it's kind of like a mini state fair,
Oh yeah, like a carnival
like
kind of thing, but not that
a
glamorous.
carnival, like what they have at the end of Greece,
Yeah,
but smaller,
but not that glamorous.
without the hand jiving.
Without the flying car.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, I think we'd gone to maybe a fun fair in Ravenscourt Park. Anyway, and then some guy who seemed old at the time, was probably younger than you or I are now, but um, some guy came up to us and was sort of very insistent, saying, "Come to the Rose Garden. I want to take photos of you." And we thankfully had the good sense to be like, "No, thank you." And he was quite insistent, but we were like, "No, no," and we just kind of like started running away. But
Well,
yeah,
I grew up in situations that were always sort of like the outsider, on the outside or on the fringes of society. So I
mm,
lived on the beach or in caravan parks or in a tent, or I was
mm,
hanging around seaside fairs when they would come to town. And there
mm,
was, it just seemed to draw in those sorts of people who would
yeah,
do weird stuff or illegal stuff. And so, yeah, like I can remember when we were kids being flashed by people on the beach, or
right,
there was always something like that going on. But talking about letting your kids go out and do stuff on their
mm,
own, I wasn't even 10 and I was going off on my own all day. I mean, all day.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
it wasn't like half an hour to the beach. We'd go out at like 10 in the morning and come back at like 5 or 6 at night. And
yeah.
I wasn't,
Is that on
maybe
your
I was
own or with your older sisters?
both, like
Right.
both. And
But then,
then,
I mean, I don't know if we can sort of say it on the podcast, but without go, well, you can go into detail if you want. It's your call to make. But your parents weren't exactly the good, the good model of parenting, to put it mildly. So,
but
that's. But
yeah, outside of that, I felt like outside of like our negligent parentings, um, people that we had in our lives, like I felt we ran into other kids as well. There were always kids like,
mm,
like hanging around the cliffs at the seaside or at the fair,
yeah,
and it would just be like marauding children together with
yeah,
no parents or supervisors.
it is. It is. It does feel in a lot of ways, and I'm not a parent, so I don't know. It's maybe it's not my place to say it. But it does feel in many ways like it, we're the world isn't necessarily more dangerous, but we're just much more aware of the dangers, or we're much more willing to consider and acknowledge them. Maybe the dangers have always been there, and like you said, our parents are of a generation where bad shit happened,
Yeah,
but they just decide, or they just try to minimize or ignore things rather
yeah,
than
yeah.
face them.
Because children were taken and murdered in the older days.
God, yeah,
Like
yeah.
people were abducted and murdered. I mean, like no more or less,
Oh,
probably. I don't know.
yeah.
I'm just
Probably.
saying
I mean,
that.
I would think more, because I think you would think now there is so much more technology that can, and so much more infrastructure that can help to trace criminality like that. Whereas in years gone by, I mean, people could get away with so much more because there was no digital paper trail. There was no, CCTV. There was maybe not even the public interest or funding in investigating a lot of crime, especially to marginalized people. So it's in some ways you'd hope that the world is a safer place now, but I suppose it makes it even more of a, not paradox. Is it paradox? that I think, we're less inclined to let our children out on their own, even though it should, in theory, be a safer world.
Yeah, I'm still reading that book about Mexico. I'm just about to finish it.
Oh
I
yeah.
just sadly read a chapter on femicide. And when this book came out, like a year or a year and a half ago, the statistic was that on average, 11 women a day are killed in Mexico.
Wow.
And that is staggering, like
Yeah.
absolutely staggering
Yeah.
statistic.
Yeah.
And I don't know, like I don't know what I want to say about that, other than I just
Yeah. I mean,
wanted
it's
to
hard
say it
to.
because sometimes these things just feel like they need to be said or
Yeah.
acknowledged.
I
But
mean, it does go back to something you sort of touched on earlier, and you were talking about how you felt that in Australia there seemed to be a lot more like violent crime, a lot of domestic abuse related crime. I mean, domestic abuse is a crime in and of itself, of course, but and criminality, violent crime, perhaps is the right term. But I don't know. We're not criminologists, but it does definitely. Australia does have that reputation. Maybe not as much anymore, but it definitely. When I lived there, you did really get that sense, and maybe it's something to do with the sort of the geography of it as well. There's so much. There's so much of the country is low population density and remote, and that sort of geography allows for crime to go unnoticed more, maybe. And it's maybe similar
what
in
are you talking
Mexico.
about? Sorry, are you talking about Mexico or Australia?
I'm talking about Australia, but I was just going to say, yeah, and that makes me think about Mexico as well. Like outside of the big cities of Mexico, you have a lot of space, and maybe that is the sort of the recipe you need for violent crimes like that to happen. I don't know, but
I'm just looking at the statistics in Australia, and it says here that in the first 4 months of 2024, so this year, 33 women were murdered in Australia.
33 in
33 in
four
4 months.
months,
And
and that's a population of what, 22 million?
something like that, 26 or something.
Yeah,
But it
yeah,
says that it's roughly one woman every 4 days. So it's not at the level of 11 per day in Mexico,
no,
but it it's shocking. Like it's
yeah,
shocking, and a lot of that is domestic. I think most of that is domestic violence.
yeah,
There's such a culture of toxic masculinity in Australia
yeah. Well,
that,
I mean, you could argue, you could draw some parallels with Mexico there, couldn't you?
although in Mexico there's a lot more the machismo or the toxic masculinity seems to be really connected to that religious fervor or patriarchy of the Catholic Church and men being the head of the family and not being questioned because there is what sort of God wanted. Like it's really
Right,
steeped in
right.
Catholicism. And so then
Okay.
when I think one of the problems there, one of the many problems is when that order starts to get upset or tilted. Say, for instance, women go out and work or have
Hmm.
more autonomy. Is
Hmm.
seen as a challenge to the fragility of the
Yeah,
toxic masculinity and machismo
yeah,
in Mexico. And probably, yeah, you're right, the same in Australia. Like men think they're well, I don't even know what the problem is in Australia because so many of these men are privileged and have
hmm.
so much given to them, handed to them.
Hmm.
I don't really know what they're kicking off about, but
Yeah. I mean, there were very, very different situations, but both countries were colonized, but the results are very, very different. In Australia, obviously, the Aboriginal Australians, Indigenous Australians were there, for so long, and then Europeans came and just murdered and decimated populations, and maybe that had gave rise to an elevated toxic masculinity in modern Australian culture. And in Mexico, of course, the conquistadors did a very similar thing, but Octavio Paz, the Mexican writer, he said that a lot of the modern day sort of machismo of Mexican among Mexican men, he thought was, I think, directly related to the conquest and the feelings of emasculation. So I don't know, but it's different because in Australia, of course, it's the colonizers who are now committing all the
Yeah.
crimes, all the
Well,
machismo crimes.
yeah, I suppose that you can't separate the history of it being a violent modern country, like settled on violence. You can't
Yeah,
take that out of the psyche, the collective psyche.
yeah,
Similarly, like where I grew up in Brisbane, where it was illegal to be gay up until 1990. You still can't take that entrenched homophobia out of people.
no,
It's
no,
still there, and so people can switch back into that so easily. I mean, look what's happened here in the UK over the last week or so with the racist riots that are
yeah,
happening.
yeah,
It doesn't take much to switch these racists into that state of mind. And similarly, I mean, all of this comes from toxic masculinity once again. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't women and children involved in these
no.
racist
But if you look at the footage, it's overwhelmingly white men, like
Yeah.
and again, like that's I mean, that's another episode in a podcast. But if viewers outside the UK maybe might not be aware of what we're referencing here, so
I think it's on the news everywhere. I think people are kind of in a bit of
okay,
shock.
okay. But speaking of the right, I was on my morning walk today, and on Spotify, "Interesting Drug" by the Smiths. No, Morrissey. It was
Morris.
Morrissey, wasn't it? "Interesting Drug" by Morrissey came on, and it made me chuckle because the first line, if unless I'm mishearing the lyrics, but I'm pretty sure the first line in the song is "There are some bad people on the right." Is that the
Well,
correct lyric?
I'm unsure, and I think that as a former Morrissey fan, as a reformed Morrissey fan myself, I think there's always been an element of contention to what he is singing or if he changes it from the live version. So
Ah,
sometimes it sounds like he's saying there are some bad people on the right, and then it sounds like he's saying there are some bad people on the rise,
oh
RISE.
right. Well, maybe as he became more right wing, he changed the lyric to suit his politics. But it made me chuckle because I mean the song, if it is "There are some bad people on the right," it would make sense because the song is very much an anti-government. The lyrics are very anti-government, and it would have been at the time when the Tories were in power, when Margaret Thatcher was the prime minister. And I'm pretty sure if you watch the video, it's a very sort of political video about liberating animals from a animal testing laboratory or something like that.
Yeah.
But it
I
made me
mean,
chuckle
the
because
lyrics, sorry, I'm just looking at the lyrics, and it is on the rise,
on the
RISE.
rise. Oh, okay. So I'm just totally mishearing the lyric then.
Yeah, and yeah, like the lyrics would point to like oppression of people through government, like
Yeah.
working schemes and
Yeah. Government
employment
scheme designed
schemes.
to kill your dreams.
But also he always had this element in these songs where you could slightly read it sort of either way, that he was being progressive or if he was being like a gammon.
Well, I mean, that was his whole sort of shtick, wasn't it? It was like, I'm going to dress like a skinhead, but I'm going to say I'm not a skinhead, I'm not racist. So it's like he kind of was always sort of flirting with the right, flirting with the extreme right, maybe.
Yeah, and then as time went on, it became less flirting and then
Just
being
embracing.
openly supportive or vocal about people who were are considered by most people to be right wing and far right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm not making stuff up here, and this isn't something that I have to be worried about being sued about. But he said,
Morrissey does like a lawsuit, though.
yeah, but I mean, this is documented where he said that Nigel Farage would make a good prime minister, or he spoke in support of that far right French politician.
Yeah, Marine Le Pen.
And Le Pen, yeah, but then also other stuff like speaking up, sort of not in support of Kevin Spacey, but saying things similar to like, oh, there's two sides to every story, and there must have been some element of the young man wanting to be in that room with him, and so I don't know if those what I would consider abhorrent views to have always been there inside him. They just haven't been obvious, or if he has just become more like that the older he gets. I don't know.
Yeah.
But it got to a point where there were a few of these things in a row, whereas like a Morrissey super fan, I couldn't make excuses for myself anymore.
Yeah.
And I decided to step away from that, which is weird, right? Because I don't know him personally, and I don't know what me making that decision really means to anybody. But I didn't want to participate in absorbing music or art from somebody who holds those extreme views. Much like you wouldn't catch me dead in the vicinity of anything Harry Potter related because of J.K. Rowling. I think that people want to say, "Oh, you're a snowflake," or you're being too sensitive. It doesn't matter. You can separate the artist from the art, but I've got myself to live with. I've got my own ethical framework that I live within, and I would not be happy with myself if I participated with these people, even as a fan. So
and it is hard. Like, in some ways you wish you could separate the art from the artist, but that's not how popular music or just popular culture really works. Is that you build these parasocial connections with people. So when you like an actor or a director or a musician or a band, it's not purely based on their output, it's based on who they are as people as well. So it's very hard, and it is sad because the Smiths and Morrissey as a solo artist have such an incredible musical legacy. But it is so, like, Interesting Drug is an amazing song, like an amazing song, not least because of Kirsty MacColl's incredible contribution, the backing vocals and arrangement. But it's sad when somebody whose output or whose art you admire then turns into an arsehole.
Has there been anyone in your life? I mean, for me, the biggest example is Morrissey. I mean, how obsessed I was with Morrissey. I traveled the world to see him in concert. Since I was a child, I was obsessed. And
we should tell that story of going to Vegas.
Well,
because it's a funny story. So this was when Sean and I were living together in Chiswick back in 1999. Yeah, that's right. And we'd been drinking. It was like a Saturday night. We were just drinking at home, and I had passed out or gone to bed, one or both. And then Sean, it was early days of the internet, I suppose, or maybe it was no, I think we had the internet at home.
That's how
AOL dial-up.
Yeah.
And anyway, sort of Sean shook me awake at like 3 a.m. or something, and he was like, "We're going to Las Vegas to see Morrissey in concert," and I was like, I didn't know what was going on, but anyway, so Sean on a drunken whim had booked tickets to see Morrissey at the House of Blues in Las Vegas, and it was October 1999. And it wasn't that far. It was like a month away or something, wasn't it? It wasn't too far ahead, I don't think.
I don't remember much about that, the elements of how long it was or anything like that.
But you'd never seen him play before, right? That was
I'd never seen him play. I'd never been to the US before.
That's right, yeah. So we booked a holiday. We flew to LA and we spent, I don't know, a few days in LA. We drove to Vegas. I think it was my first time in Vegas. I'm pretty sure it was.
And I think it was your first time driving in LA, and it was that scene from Clueless. It was that scene from Clueless on the freeway where we didn't know how to get off one road and merge onto another, and we ended up driving.
I'd literally, I think, passed my driving test in London about 3 weeks before we went, and I can't believe we came back alive from that trip because I remember we got to LAX, the airport in Los Angeles, and we hired a car. We didn't pre-book a car. This was in the days we didn't pre-book a car. You just showed up in another country and would sort of go to the different counters. We got a car and we drove out of LAX, and of course pre-mobile phones, so we didn't have a map. We didn't know where we were going really, and I think we got onto Sepulveda Boulevard, which is it's a very, very long road in LA, which at some points feels a bit like a freeway because it's sort of 4 or 5 lanes in both directions. And I think we just headed north on Sepulveda for about an hour. And I think I just didn't know what I was doing. I just passed my test. And of course, driving on the left-hand side here, driving on the right-hand side, I could barely change lane. It was so weird being on the other side of the car to drive. And anyway, I think we eventually managed to pull off Sepulveda, and it was a bit hair-raising. Anyway, you continue the story about what happened when we got to Vegas.
Well, we went to Vegas. We queued up outside because I wanted to be down the front at the concert. So it was like a very hot day, extremely hot. We were sat outside. More people came. I think we were about 10 people from the front.
It was House of Blues is in Mandalay Bay. Is it the Mandalay Bay Casino? Yeah.
Yeah. And the door was outside the actual casino. It wasn't inside the casino. So it was outside in the sun and the heat.
Mm-hmm.
And there was all the Morrissey diehard fans there. And then about 10 minutes, I think, before the doors were meant to open, the Nevada State Troopers showed up. And we were like, oh, that's weird. Wonder why they're here. And then somebody came out and said, the show is not going ahead tonight. It's been cancelled. And we were all like, what's going on? And they said, Morrissey's guitarist has hurt his back. And, well, the show can't go on. And, I mean, I've since come to learn that being a Morrissey fan means that the chances of him cancelling a show are incredibly high.
Yeah.
For sometimes frivolous reasons, sometimes no reason given at all. Sometimes his health, sometimes it's blamed on someone else's health. So anyway, we went to a hotel room with some of the other Morrissey fans that we met in the line, and we drank and drank and drank and were so ridiculously hungover the next day.
Mm.
And we had to drive back to Los Angeles, and we had to stop at a truck stop so I could throw up. I was wretched. I mean, you must have still been drunk. I don't know how you were driving.
Maybe, yeah.
And we were so wretched. And then I cried all the way as well. So I was crying pretty much the whole way from Las Vegas to Los Angeles. And I, obviously on reflection now, there was much deeper trauma and stuff that I hadn't dealt with in my life. But I really thought it was because I hadn't seen Morrissey and that I wanted to see him, and I was really upset.
Yeah.
And you were in the mood of saying that you hated Morrissey and you'd never go and see him again. Did you ever get to see him live?
Yeah, I did. I saw him twice, I think. Once in Manchester and once at the Hammersmith Apollo, maybe. And we saw him in Brisbane once, didn't we?
Yeah, the Livid Festival.
Livid Festival, yeah. But that trip, it did end on a better note, though, didn't it? Because then we got to see Amy Mann at Largo's, a tiny little, the old Largo, tiny little venue, and
on Fairfax.
We got seated at the front, didn't we? Because we told, what's his name, the guy that runs it, not Fergus.
I can't remember his name.
Anyway, whatever his name is, the guy that runs Largo, we told him, I think, what happened with Morrissey, that we'd come all the way from London to see him in Vegas. And he put us in a table right at the front. And he obviously had then told Amy Mann the story, because then sort of halfway through the set, she said, where are the guys that went to see Morrissey?
And then I requested a song and she played it for me, which was very sweet.
Yeah.
And afterwards we met her after the show. Mm-hmm. And I said, I don't know why he cancelled the show. And she said, well, it was drugs. It was definitely drugs. But in her Amy Mann
Amy
deadpan
Mann's
way.
words. Amy Mann's words, not ours.
But it was clearly a joke, and it was delivered in her deadpan, droll way that she
Yeah,
talks.
yeah,
And when I said to her, this is a dream come true seeing you. It was one of the things I wanted to do before I die. And she just looked at me and said, oh, what are you dying?
yeah,
She was so hilarious. But she was
yeah.
so sweet. And, she has sung that song for me a few times on a request now.
Which one was it?
I've had it.
Oh, right, yeah. Brilliant song.
And she once played it for me in London. I requested it. I tweeted
Mm.
her, and back when it was still Twitter, and asked her to play it at the Royal Festival Hall, I think. I
Oh,
saw
right.
her. And she said, we weren't going to play this song tonight, but someone wrote to me and told me it was their favourite song today, so I'm going to do it. And she did it, and I was so thrilled. But it's one of these songs that when I
I,
hear it,
yeah,
I get instantly sad. Can
yeah,
some music do that to you?
yeah. It's beautifully it's an amazing song.
Like Hill heard me listening to Amy Mann the other day, and he said, I don't like when you listen to this. It makes you really sad and depressed. Like he said, you get really morose and melancholy. And
Yeah,
I said to him, I don't know what came first, the chicken George or the egg. I don't know. I don't know if I'm sad because I'm listening to Amy Mann
right. Or you
or
listen to, well, I
Amy Mann.
mean, not to sound really wanky and like cliche, but that's what good art does, right? It provides a framework for us to feel our emotions, good,
Yeah.
bad, whatever. Yeah.
But
Um,
going back to that idea of absolutely just not canceling somebody, that's such a ridiculous term, but you yourself making the choice as a consumer to
hmm.
not to distance yourself from a product or a company or an artist. I mean, apart from Morrissey, which is a big example of mine, can you think of any time you've done that in your life?
Um, None that come to mind. I mean, obviously there have been artists that I've liked, and then just I've they've gone in a different direction to what I like. I can't think of a good example of somebody who's really sort of disappointed me or I felt really let down by. Um, I mean, it's nowhere near the level that you're talking about, but I think one of my favorite films is Rosemary's Baby. But now, obviously, given what Roman Polanski has been accused of, and it has he been found guilty of? I can't remember. But
Uh,
anyway,
I don't know.
it's very hard to watch a film like that now. Even though it is such a brilliant film, but it wasn't the same level. I was never fanatical about it like you were with the Smiths and Morrissey. Um,
I even struggle to listen to the Smiths because it's still Morrissey. Do you know what I mean? Like I
oh
struggle.
yeah, yeah.
If a Smiths song comes on somewhere where I'm at, like if
Mm,
I'm at a gig or a pub or something like that, I really enjoy hearing it because it's the soundtrack of my life. I mean, these
yeah.
songs were woven through the fabric of everything that I did in my
Mm,
life. Everything from when I first moved out of home to when I was depressed, happy, drunk, whatever, you name it, whatever experience I've had, it was Morrissey and the Smiths was there for me, along with some
mm,
other artists. And it took a lot, probably a lot longer than I'm proud to admit, for me to make the decision to step away and make that sort of emotional space or that separation. And I can remember where it really, really sunk in was when Morrissey, in an interview, said that Berlin was the rape capital of Europe because of migrants.
oh
And
really? God.
yeah, and once again, this is not my opinion about him. This is in a transcribed, recorded interview,
Mm,
and I was like, okay, this is me. I'm out of this. I
mm,
can't reconcile my personal beliefs and how I want the world to be with what this gives me. Because
mm,
before that, it was like I had this balancing act. Like this is what it means to me. This is
mm,
how sort of repulsive his views are. And then when
mm,
it tipped, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm out. And I was in Mexico and he was playing the Auditorio Nacional, the National Auditorium,
Yeah.
and Hill had free tickets to go, and I was just like, no, like you couldn't pay me to go.
Yeah.
Like I don't want a
Yeah.
free ticket. I don't want. They wouldn't, even if someone said, "Look, here's £1,000 to go and see it." I was just like, no, this is where I draw the line now.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting. I don't know if it's always been that way, but definitely I think I feel like since the 80s and 90s, and obviously with the rise of social media and the access to celebrities that we have now, that parasocial thing is almost as important, if not more important, than the actual artistic product.
Yeah, and I don't mind people being an asshole now and then, or I'd rather them be nice. But
Yeah,
I think there's
Like
a
Pete Burns might be a good example. Like Pete Burns would say some like vile things about people, but he was never like, punching down on, you know, people less fortunate in society. He was
and I wonder if he
part.
would have if he lived long enough. Do our heroes become sort of vilified if they live long enough to become like bigoted old people?
Yeah, yeah.
But well,
Makes me think of that.
who's
I was
old
just,
that isn't like that?
um, oh, I don't know, like loads of people. I mean, a good example might be Miriam Margolyes.
Yeah,
She's old. She's 80. I think she's early 80s. I can't remember exactly. But she's, not like that at all. She's liberally minded. She's progressive. And, I mean, maybe she's not. Maybe that's the public persona that she projects. Because her management or her publicist says, this is the zeitgeist. These are the things you need to say. So who knows?
I
But
don't get that vibe.
no, I don't at
I
all. I
get
think,
honesty from her. I
yeah.
suppose somebody else from our generation though is like Cyndi Lauper is a good example of someone who has stayed really progressive and does a lot for trans rights and raises a lot of money to help young trans people who are homeless or facing homelessness,
Yeah.
and never comes out with really anything problematic.
hmm
She's how old is she now? 70,
Um,
72, or
is she? I
how
don't
old
know.
is
I'm not
she?
sure. She's playing in London next year, but she's playing at the O2, and I really dislike the O2 as a venue.
Oh,
So I'm
that
thinking
many
of going to
people in
see.
it.
I'm thinking of seeing her in Manchester or something instead.
Yeah. Um, so
So,
I've just looked up, go full circle, I've just looked up mollycoddle on my phone.
oh yeah,
It was formed by combining the pamper sense of coddle
the
with the
what
name
sense of
molly.
coddle?
Well, like to coddle someone is to pamper somebody.
Oh,
So it's not
pamper.
necessarily.
I thought you said panther, like the
Oh,
the
pamper.
wildcat.
Yeah. With the name Molly, a nickname for Mary, which I didn't know.
Oh,
And so its earliest known uses is the mid 1800s, when mollycoddle was a noun, a disparaging and now dated synonym of our modern wimp. But in short time, it was being used as the verb you're likely to encounter today. So you
oh,
were a mollycoddle. You didn't mollycoddle somebody.
right. Okay. Oh, thank you. I thought you were
Once
looking
again,
up
the
how old
education,
how old.
what's that?
I thought you were looking up how old Cyndi Lauper is.
Oh, I'll do that as well. But I was just
Okay.
saying, once again, the education value of this podcast is through the
It's
roof.
wonderful, isn't it? Live research, people doing our research live on air.
Do you know, I don't think Cindy gets the flowers that she deserves, the recognition. I
Okay.
think that, we took, Madonna is obviously much more, not influential, but like just noted.
Successful
Yeah, successful
in
and noted.
modern
Like in the
terms, yeah.
history books, you look Madonna,
Yeah.
or you look at Cher even, or you look at Celine Dion. Cindy, to me, is as important as those people, and obviously as talented. And I
hmm
just don't think, especially younger, like sound like such an old fogey, but young people don't seem to get it. Like I was listening to someone do a reaction video to Chapel Rowan, "Good Luck, Babe."
hmm
They were listening to it, And all through it, they're going, "Oh, she sounds like Stevie Nicks. She's giving this. She's giving these
Right.
vibes." And then I
Right.
was like, the most obvious influence to
Cindy.
me, it screams of Cyndi Lauper.
Yeah.
Like those
Yeah.
those vocals she does on "Good Luck, Babe," where she's yelling
Yeah.
and holding that note for a really long time after the bridge. It's so Cyndi Lauper. Yeah,
Yeah.
Cyndi Lauper is 71 years old,
Oh, wow. Okay.
and she was born on the 22nd of June, 1953.
Well, this tour that she's doing next year, it's billed the farewell tour. So,
Well,
yeah.
yeah, I would love to see her. I mean, we saw her in Sydney at the
Yep.
State Theatre for the what was that album of covers she did? At Last.
Yeah.
So whatever that
So
tour was,
yeah.
Live at Last.
Was that when Tony Perrin sat next to us in the audience?
Yes,
Yeah.
that's a whole other story.
That's another
That
story.
might just be too inconsequential or not important for people to stick with us through.
No, I think we need, maybe not in this episode, but I think you do need to tell that story another time because it spans years as well, that story.
Oh, yeah, it's hilarious.
But we saw her also at the House of Blues in Atlantic City.
Yes.
Remember that?
And you saw her, didn't you, at Royal Albert Hall?
I saw at the Albert Hall. It would have been maybe 89. No, sorry. No, 95, 96. When did 12 Deadly Sins come out? It was, I think it was that tour. You know, when she did the re-release of Hey Now, Girls Just Want to Have Fun.
I can't remember what year that was.
Yeah, I think it was that tour. So that would have been 95 or 96, I think.
Right, and then I saw her. I'm just seeing if I can quickly look it up, but it's taking a lot of.
It's not a good use of airtime, I don't think.
No,
to be doing live research, looking at your
I
device.
saw her on the 23rd of October, 1989.
Where's that?
In Brisbane Entertainment Centre on a Night to Remember World Tour.
Boondall,
in the Boondall Wetlands, and it was so exciting. I mean, because even though that album wasn't as big as She's So Unusual or True Colors. Like her third album really didn't sell as many. She was still huge. And I think it was her first time in Australia, so she was still riding the crest of, hey, these people are really hungry to see me. And it was such a wonderful concert. I loved seeing that show. And just so exciting. She's such a dynamic performer.
Yeah.
I love Cyndi so much, and she needs to get more props. She needs to go down in history more and remembered more than she is. It's a bit disappointing that people don't seem to give her credit. But I really find like Chapel Rowan, her sensibilities, not like the way she looks, the way she sings, but also the style of songs, that sort of rock pop sort of mix.
I mean, in that, in the Chapel Rowan Tiny Desk concert, she's giving Cyndi Lauper. I mean, that's, a real tribute to her look particularly. But her vocal style is very much, influenced by Cyndi.
For sure. I don't know if we're about to wrap up, but I don't know if we have to talk about the Olympics at all, or are we not interested in talking about the Olympics?
The only thing that has interested me, apart from obviously Celine at the in the opening ceremony, was the headline that I shared on my Instagram the other day, and it was I'm not going to get my phone out and do a Sean, but it was along the lines of French athlete has his hopes dashed by his own penis. And it was the high jump, is that what you call it? The vault?
Pole vault?
Yes. He was doing the pole vault and his genitalia knocked the pole off, and so he missed out on a medal because of that, which, sorry to be a gay cliche, but that was really the only thing that's gotten me excited about the Olympics so far.
Putting the pole in pole vault. So gross. To be like
I know,
that.
there are so many. I mean, you can look online. There are so many.
It's
awful...
but the objectification of that poor human now for the rest of his life,
I know,
the rest of their life is going to be like, oh, your penis was so big you lost the Olympics. I mean, it's just ridiculous. Imagine if that was your legacy. And also,
I don't know, maybe he's got a budding career with OnlyFans as a result. He might make more money.
I honestly don't I don't even believe. I think his penis did connect with that beam, but if you watch it, which I have several times,
On
I
slow
think
motion.
I think the beam was already on its way down. He didn't clear it with his legs properly, and I hope because
Okay.
I watched it with the actual sound on, and the
Okay.
person was saying, "Oh no, he hasn't made it," before the penis even, the genitals even scraped by.
Okay.
Because you'd think you'd have to.
I
I
mean,
don't
it
know
did
how.
look very much like on the video. It did very much look like it was quite, it was there, and it was the his package that really kind of knocked it out of place. But anyway, maybe we should change subject before it gets too raunchy.
There are some bad penis on the rise.
Uh-huh. Um,
Okay,
right.
well, that's us for another episode.
Yeah. And you know
And
what? We made it through a whole episode and we didn't mention those two Australian sisters at all.
I don't know who you're talking about.
No,
I
it's
have
incredible.
no idea. Although I do need to talk to you about a certain podcast where one of them was mentioned. So I'll
Okay.
talk to you about that off air because we really just can't bore people
Oh,
talking about
okay.
them.
That's a tease.
But talking about them, who we don't
Hmm.
want to talk about too much.
They
But
who
not
shall
only
not be
just talking
named.
about them, talking about other people who are talking about them. Like it's just ridiculous.
Okay. All right.
It's just it's too much. I think people's goodwill will be stretched,
Okay.
too far.
All right. Well, we should wrap up there. Is there anything we need to tell people about before we go?
No, just if they want to follow either of us, they can follow me at Fat Gay Vegan anywhere on social media, and they
And
can follow you at.
Josh and the Jumpstarts on all social channels, including X for now. We were just talking about, Sean and I were just talking about this was it yesterday we were talking about whether we still feel comfortable using X? Because talk about having bad people on the right or on the rise, whichever it is.
Yeah.
Elon Musk, owning X, it just makes me want to close my account. But anyway,
But it's
maybe we
also
can.
it's an unbearable amount of disgusting content being served and
Yeah.
pushed. It's really unbearable. And I
Yeah.
mean, if you were vulnerable or at risk, it would be enough to send you over the edge. It's really,
Yeah.
really awful.
Yeah. Although I have to say, I mean, it was on X that I managed to see that French Olympic athlete's hopes dashed by his own penis. So
Do we even know that poor person's name? I feel like we should at least give them the dignity of saying their
Michael,
name.
I think it's Michael. I could be completely wrong there, but
I
anyway.
won't Google it, but if you're interested in giving this person the dignity of at least knowing their name, go and Google it and watch the video.
All right. Okay, well, let's see what are the Olympics over now? I don't even know. I mean, obviously, my interest in it came and went as quickly as that pole collapsed.
I've got a whole thing to say about the nationalism and the
Well,
enforced
yeah, that's
patriotism and stuff and how it leads to division, but not enough time now. We've run over.
yeah. We don't have the range.
No.
All right, folks. Well, you can follow us as well on our podcast social media channels. You can see all of those at the end of the episode on screen, or you can go to the show notes and we'll post them there. And we will be back in your feeds next week. We will see you next Tuesday, you could say.
We don't say that. Bye-bye.
No.
Bye.
Bye-bye.